Imagine a horror film so crisp in 4K that every drop of blood glistens, every shadow breathes, and every whisper feels alive. Some movies lose their terror in ultra-high definition, but these didn't. They thrived in it. From restored nightmares to cult classics reborn through digital sorcery. These are the top 15 4K horror movies that actually look good. Let's descend into the dark, where clarity makes the fear sharper. Number 15. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. When Tobe Hooper's gritty nightmare first hit theaters, audiences thought it was real footage. The grain, the grime, it felt documentary raw. So when its 4K restoration arrived decades later, fans feared it would lose its authenticity. Instead, it became something new, a chilling museum piece of American horror. The story remains a primal scream. 5 friends trapped by a family of cannibalistic slaughterhouse workers. Leatherface, with his chainsaw roar and stitched mask, remains one of cinema's most haunting figures. But in 4K, the dirt of Texas soil and the sweat on the victims' faces tell an even darker truth. The realism isn't gone, it's amplified. The controversy was immediate. Early critics accused the restoration of beautifying horror, yet Hooper himself once said his vision was a reflection of madness under sunlight, and now that sunlight shines in pin-sharp HDR. Behind the scenes, archivists spent months removing scratches while preserving its notorious yellow tint. The result? A film that feels both cleaner and more nauseating. Every creak of the Sawyer house echoes like a scream in high fidelity. Today, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre stands as proof that clarity doesn't kill terror, it reveals it. In 4K, you don't just watch the horror, you feel it breathing beside you. Number 14. Suspiria, 1977. Dario Argento's Suspiria was once described as a nightmare painted in neon, but no VHS or DVD ever captured its full delirious palette until the 4K restoration by Synapse Films. What was once a blur of reds and blues now glows like a fever dream. The plot follows Susie Banyan, a young dancer who discovers her prestigious ballet academy is run by a coven of witches. But Suspiria isn't about logic, it's about atmosphere. The colors, the music, the architecture, they hypnotize. The 4K remaster became infamous for one reason, its shocking fidelity. Fans saw details they never noticed, blood pooling like oil paint, feathers floating in impossible contrast. Some argued it ruined the mystery. Others called it a resurrection. During restoration, technicians referenced Argento's original Technicolor negatives, matching the hues exactly as they appeared in 1977. The result was breathtaking. Goblin's pounding score now hits like a ritual heartbeat through Dolby Atmos. Critics reevaluated the film, calling it a psychedelic cathedral. Even Argento admitted it. Never looked this alive before. What was once dismissed as style over substance now stands as an art horror masterpiece that only 4K could justify. In ultra-high definition, Suspiria isn't just remastered, it's reborn as a sensory hallucination of beauty and fear. Number 13. The Thing, 1982. John Carpenter's The Thing was a box office disappointment, crushed by E.T. and cynicism. But in 4K, its icy paranoia finally gleams with the perfection it always deserved. The Antarctic snow looks blindingly real, and the creature effects, still practical, still grotesque, feel freshly alive. The story unfolds in a remote research base where a shape-shifting alien mimics its victims. Every frame oozes distrust. In 4K, the claustrophobia tightens. The frost clings to Kurt Russell's beard like needles, and the flamethrowers paint the snow with infernal orange light. Its controversy was legendary. Critics in 1982 called it disgusting and nihilistic. Carpenter's career nearly froze because of it. But time and 4K changed everything. When Universal released the 4K restoration, fans called it a revelation. Suddenly, the monster's viscera weren't camp. They were art. Behind the scenes, Universal scanned the original negatives in native 4K HDR10, supervised by cinematographer Dean Cundy himself. His lighting, once murky on tape, now dances with shadow and flame. Today, The Thing is celebrated as one of the greatest horror films ever made, its paranoia sharper than ever. In 4K, you don't just watch isolation, you feel the cold bite into your bones. Number 12. The Shining, 1980. When Stanley Kubrick's The Shining was restored in 4K, critics gasped. It was like reopening a haunted hotel and discovering the ghosts were clearer than ever. Every corridor of the Overlook now glows with an unsettling perfection. Every carpet pattern pulses like a hypnotic code. The film's story of writer Jack Torrance unraveling under isolation while caretaking a snowbound hotel with his family has become mythic. But in 4K, the details once hidden in shadow reveal new layers of dread. The faint breath in the cold hallways, the flicker of the typewriter, the haunted gleam in Jack Nicholson's eyes. Originally, The Shining polarized audiences. Some called it slow, others dismissed it as cold. But Kubrick's meticulous visual design, his obsession with symmetry, his icy precision, was waiting for a format like this. The 4K restoration from Warner Brothers went back to the original 35mm negatives, bringing out contrasts that make the film feel eerily modern. Behind the scenes, Kubrick's perfectionism was torture. Dozens of takes, obsessive lighting. Shelley Duvall's breakdown became legend. Yet now in ultra-high definition, that exhaustion seeps through every frame. The tension feels alive. In its 4K rebirth, The Shining becomes something far more intimate and terrifying. It's no longer just a ghost story. It's the slow disintegration of the human mind captured with unsettling clarity. And the longer you stare into those perfect, symmetrical halls, the more you begin to wonder, were the ghosts ever really gone? Number 11. Alien, 1979. Ridley Scott's Alien was always a masterpiece of shadows and fear, but in 4K HDR, its darkness deepens, and that's the real horror. It's not brighter, it's richer. The inky black of space becomes endless, and the xenomorph's glistening body reflects light like a living nightmare. When it premiered, Alien was hailed as Jaws in space. The story of the crew of the Nostromo unwittingly bringing aboard a parasitic organism became a slow-burn descent into terror. The 4K remaster restored not just the image, but the texture, the condensation on metal walls, the dim hum of machinery, the claustrophobic hum of the ship. The restoration process was arduous. Using the original 35mm negative, colorists painstakingly enhanced contrast without bleaching the shadows. Fans feared it would ruin the mystery, but it did the opposite. It made the unknown darker, the known sharper. The slime on the alien's jaw, the fear in Veronica Cartwright's eyes. Every frame now hums with biological menace. When Alien hit 4K Blu-ray, audiences rediscovered its elegance. Critics said, "It's not a remaster, it's a resurrection." H.R. Geiger's biomechanical designs come alive like twisted cathedral sculptures, while Jerry Goldsmith's haunting score rumbles through Dolby Atmos as if echoing from inside the creature's ribcage. In 4K, Alien doesn't lose its mystery, it multiplies it. You can see every detail, yet it feels even more unknowable. That's the paradox of true horror. The clearer you see it, the less you understand. Number 10. The Witch, 2015. Robert Eggers' The Witch was never meant to be comforting, and in 4K it becomes an almost religious experience in dread. Shot using natural light and period-accurate lenses, the film's 4K transfer captures every candle flicker, every cloud that passes over the Puritan wilderness. It's as if nature itself turns against the viewer. Set in 17th century New England, the film follows a family exiled from their colony descending into paranoia and spiritual ruin. The 4K image renders the cold forests with terrifying precision. Mud, frost, and fog look tactile. You can almost smell the rot beneath the leaves. When released, The Witch divided audiences. Some called it too slow, too artistic. Others hailed it as the rebirth of intelligent horror. But in 4K HDR, its visual language, the chiaroscuro of daylight and darkness, feels painterly, like a Rembrandt trapped in a nightmare. Behind the scenes, Eggers obsessed over authenticity. The costumes were hand-stitched from historical materials, the dialogue was pulled from old diaries and court transcripts. In the 4K format, those efforts pay off. The realism becomes suffocating. Critics say The Witch in 4K doesn't just look real, it feels possessed. You notice the faint tears in fabric, the quiver of candlelight that flickers just as a sinister whisper begins. This isn't a horror movie anymore. It's a medieval curse you witness in impossible detail, and the more clearly you see it, the less you can look away. Number 9. Hereditary, 2018. When Ari Aster's Hereditary hit theaters, critics called it the most disturbing family drama ever filmed. In 4K, that terror becomes almost unbearable. Every flicker of candlelight, every faint shadow in the Graham household feels possessed with purpose. It's not just horror, it's precision madness. The film begins as a tragedy. A family mourning their grandmother starts experiencing unexplainable occult events. But in ultra-high definition, the horror hides in the details. The dollhouses that mirror real rooms, the subtle movements in the background, the shift in Toni Collette's eyes from grief to hysteria. When A24 released the 4K edition, fans were stunned by its crispness. The muted browns and grays bloom into lifelike tones that make every scene feel suffocatingly domestic until the nightmare takes over. The clarity doesn't comfort, it confronts. You can see every bead of sweat, every tear trembling on Colette's cheek as she screams into the void. The controversy came from its relentless despair. Viewers walked out. Some claimed it went too far. But in 4K, that emotional violence becomes art. The miniature sets, the camera pans, the whispered incantations, all of it gleams with perverse perfection. Behind the scenes, cinematographer Paweł Pogorzelski built an optical illusion of grief, shooting the house as though it were a doll's plaything, controlling perspective to mimic the feeling of fate closing in. In 4K HDR, Hereditary is not simply a film, it's an autopsy of family trauma. You don't just watch horror happen, you watch it grow, cell by cell, in pristine digital agony. Number 8. The Exorcist, 1973. When The Exorcist was re-released in 4K for its 50th anniversary, viewers discovered something chilling. The devil looked even more real. Every grain of sweat, every tremor of fear on the actors' faces brought back with surgical clarity. It was like revisiting a trauma that had never healed. William Friedkin's film follows the possession of a young girl named Regan and the priest who attempt to save her soul. But in 4K, it's not the supernatural that dominates. It's the realism. The cracked plaster walls, the pale glow of bedside lamps, the quiet horror of a mother's helplessness. Back in 1973, theaters handed out barf bags. Viewers fainted. Critics called it spiritual pornography. But when Warner Brothers scanned the original negatives for 4K HDR, something miraculous happened. The film's age fell away, revealing a craftsmanship modern horror rarely matches. The faces look alive again. The icy breath in Regan's room is sharper. Even the shadows of the priest seem to bend unnaturally, as though something else were standing between them and the camera. The remaster sparked debate. Some said it was too clean, removing the grit of the original prints. Yet others argued it finally honored Friedkin's intentions, capturing the film's quiet reverence amidst chaos. In ultra-high definition, The Exorcist feels timeless, not old. Its horror isn't built on cheap shocks, but on the purity of suffering and faith. You don't just see evil, you see how real it looks when it's beautifully photographed. Number 7. The Lighthouse, 2019. Shot in haunting black and white and in nearly square aspect ratio, Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse already looked like a relic of madness. But in 4K HDR, the contrast transforms every frame into an oil painting of isolation and insanity. Starring Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, the film traps two lighthouse keepers on a desolate island as storms rage and sanity evaporates. The 4K format reveals the minutiae of the decay, the coarse texture of Defoe's beard, the salt stains on their clothes, the rippling mist curling around the tower's beam. Eggers used antique lenses and orthochromatic film stock to emulate early photography. The 4K restoration exposes the beauty behind the misery. Every shot looks like a photograph unearthed from the 19th century, but with modern precision. Critics called it art house Lovecraft. But audiences were divided, some bewildered, others entranced. In 4K, though, its hypnotic power becomes undeniable. The sea glimmers with menace. The gulls appear spectral. Every wave and whisper feels alive. Behind the scenes, the actors endured brutal cold and real storms. Defoe reportedly refused to blink during takes to keep the madness believable. In 4K, those choices hit harder. You can see his eyes twitch, you can feel the exhaustion. Today, the Lighthouse stands as a reminder that high definition doesn't ruin the mystery, it illuminates it. The closer you look, the less you understand, and that's exactly how madness should feel. Number 6. Halloween, 1978. When John Carpenter's Halloween received its 4K restoration, fans braced for disappointment. How could a low-budget slasher, once defined by its grain and shadows, survive such clarity? Yet the result was a revelation. In 4K HDR, every flicker of Michael Myers' knife, every trembling breath from Laurie Strode feels painfully real. The horror isn't lost, it's intensified. Shot on Panavision cameras for mere pennies, Halloween created an entire genre out of minimalism. The plot, a masked killer stalking babysitters in suburban Haddonfield, was simplicity itself. But the film's brilliance lay in its tension, in Carpenter's slow-burn dread and iconic score. The 4K transfer from the original negatives, supervised by cinematographer Dean Cundy, restored the blue shadows and autumn hues exactly as they looked in 1978. The controversy? Some fans thought it was too clean, that the polished image betrayed its gritty origins. But others found that the sharper image made it feel new again. The jack-o'-lanterns glow like real fire. The suburban streets look hauntingly normal. And Michael, standing motionless in daylight, has never looked more human or more terrifying. Behind the scenes, the restoration was an act of devotion. Technicians preserved film grain deliberately, balancing modern precision with analog warmth. Critics hailed it as a masterclass in respectful remastering. In 4K, Halloween reminds us why fear is timeless. Every detail, from the creak of the closet door to the silent approach of the mask, feels like rediscovered terror, proof that horror doesn't need to hide in darkness. Sometimes the scariest thing is seeing everything clearly. Number 5. The Blair Witch Project, 1999. Few films divided audiences like The Blair Witch Project. Shot for pennies on handheld cameras, its shaky realism terrified millions and revolutionized horror. But in 4K, it shouldn't have worked. A movie meant to feel found in degraded quality risked losing its illusion. Instead, the remastered version shocked everyone. It looked realer than ever. Set in the cursed woods of Burkittsville, Maryland, the story follows 3 film students who vanish while making a documentary about a local legend. The original's rawness was its strength, but when Lionsgate quietly prepared the 4K remaster, they took care to preserve every grain and glitch. Rather than polishing imperfections, they enhanced the contrast, bringing depth to the forest, texture to the night sky, and detail to the terror on the actors' faces. You can now see the mist rolling between the trees, the frost on Heather's skin as she cries into the camera. It's intimate horror, magnified, not sanitized. Some purists protested, saying it wasn't supposed to look good, but others realized the truth. 4K didn't ruin Blair Witch. It made the fear inescapable. You can't look away when the image feels that close. Behind the scenes, the filmmakers used consumer cameras and improvised dialogue, often starving and isolating the actors for authentic panic. The 4K clarity exposes their exhaustion, their trembling hands, their genuine confusion. In its remastered form, The Blair Witch Project stands as the ultimate paradox, a film that gains new power from the very technology it once mocked. The clearer it becomes, the harder it is to believe it's fiction. Number 4. Midsommar, 2019. Ari Aster's Midsommar is sunlight horror, terror in daylight, dread dressed in flowers. And in 4K HDR, it becomes blindingly beautiful. Every petal, every embroidered stitch, every tear-streaked face radiates in surreal clarity. It's the kind of horror that doesn't hide in the dark. It burns in plain sight. The film follows Dani, a grief-stricken woman who travels to a remote Swedish commune for a midsummer festival that turns into ritual madness. In 4K, the colors explode. The greens of the meadows, the gold of the costumes, the sky's pale blues, they lull you into serenity until the blood starts to spill. Upon release, some called it too long, too strange. But the 4K restoration changed everything. What once looked dreamlike now feels like waking from one. The high definition captures the trembling air, the faint smoke from torches, even the flicker of insanity behind Florence Pugh's eyes. Behind the scenes, cinematographer Paweł Pogorzelski, again from Hereditary, designed the film like a hallucination, with no shadows, no safe corners. In 4K HDR, that philosophy becomes suffocating. Every frame looks divine, yet something always feels wrong. Critics hailed the 4K release as a visual masterpiece of emotional decay. It's a film where beauty and horror dance together, clearer than ever before. And by the end, when the flames rise against a golden sky, you can't help but think, this isn't horror that hides. It's horror that invites you to stare. Number 3. The Silence of the Lambs, 1991. When The Silence of the Lambs was restored in 4K, it didn't just look better, it felt more dangerous. Every close-up of Anthony Hopkins' eyes, every flicker of fear on Jodie Foster's face, now burns with an intimacy almost too real. The restoration doesn't sanitize, it traps you inside the mind of a killer and his prey. Jonathan Demme's Oscar-winning psychological horror follows FBI trainee Clarice Starling as she seeks the help of imprisoned cannibal Dr. Hannibal Lecter to catch another murderer. In 4K HDR, the shadows of the Baltimore State Hospital become infinite, and Lecter's cell, once murky, is now a mirror of menace. You see the glint in his eyes, the pores of his skin, the subtle tightening of his smile. When the restoration premiered, fans were startled. Many said, "It looks too real." The fluorescent lights buzz with new life, the sterile hallways gleam, and the tension hums beneath every surface. Technicians from Kino Lorber meticulously scanned the original negatives, enhancing contrast while maintaining the film's cold realism. Behind the scenes, Hopkins' intensity was so palpable that Jodie Foster avoided eye contact between takes. In 4K, that discomfort seeps through the lens. You feel trapped between them. Every whisper, every pause becomes a weapon. In this format, The Silence of the Lambs doesn't just hold up, it devours its audience. It's no longer just a thriller. It's an interrogation of fear itself, sharpened and immortalized in high definition. And the closer you look, the less safe you feel. Number 2, The Fly, 1986. David Cronenberg's The Fly was body horror before the term even existed, a grotesque tale of science, obsession, and decay. Its 4K restoration brings it back in unflinching detail, and that's precisely what makes it horrifying. The transformation of Jeff Goldblum's Seth Brundle from man to insect isn't just disturbing, it's beautifully disgusting in 4K. The film follows Brundle, a scientist who invents teleportation pods. But a housefly sneaks into one and his DNA merges with it, leading to his slow metamorphosis. In older releases, makeup and prosthetics looked dated. In 4K HDR, they look astonishingly tactile. Every blister, every torn nail, every shudder of the flesh feels alarmingly organic. Upon release, The Fly was a critical hit and a box office surprise. But few imagined how prophetic it would look decades later. In ultra-high definition, it's less a monster movie and more a tragedy rendered in surgical precision. The practical effects by Chris Wallace Studios, preserved on 35mm film, now shine with texture unseen in decades. Behind the scenes, Cronenberg shot the film as a love story wrapped in decomposition. The 4K color grading restored its sickly greens and reds, amplifying the emotion within the rot. Critics hailed it as the most human horror ever made. In 4K, The Fly isn't a relic, it's a reflection. The flesh may decay, but the soul remains visible, trembling in perfect resolution. You can't look away, even as it falls apart before your eyes. Number 1. The Exorcist III, 1990. Often overshadowed by its predecessor, The Exorcist III was long dismissed as a strange sequel. But in 4K, it's a revelation. One of the most visually striking, spiritually terrifying films ever made. Every candlelit corridor, every flicker of divine and demonic light finally looks as director William Peter Blatty intended: crisp, haunting, and uncomfortably sacred. The film follows Detective William Kinderman as he investigates a series of murders tied to the demonic forces of the original Exorcist. What makes the 4K edition so astonishing isn't just its clarity, it's the rediscovery of its atmosphere. The hospitals gleam like tombs, the shadows breathe. The iconic hallway scare scene, long hailed as one of horror's greatest, now strikes with even greater precision. Blatty, who also wrote the original novel, directed this installment as a meditation on faith and evil. Its 4K restoration, undertaken by Shout Factory, uncovered lost details, the eerie texture of the stone walls, the halo of light around George C. Scott's weary eyes, the almost invisible crosses etched into the scenery. At release, the film was misunderstood. Studio interference and an altered ending left it buried. But the 4K version resurrected its reputation, transforming it into a cult masterpiece. Fans finally saw the cinematic sermon Blatty intended, a film where every pixel glows with dread and revelation. In 4K, The Exorcist III doesn't just scare, it preaches. It's proof that horror, when restored with reverence, becomes immortal. The devil, after all, hides in the details, and now we can see every one of them. So there you have it. 15 nightmares reborn through the clarity of 4K. Some grew more beautiful, others more unbearable, but all proved that horror doesn't fade with time, it sharpens. Which 4K horror film made you feel like you were there? Tell us below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us as we keep uncovering cinema's darkest restorations.